He lay in a pool of his own blood, his face ashen, his body thin and gaunt. As she watched, he raised his head and fixed her with a look of such intensity that his eyes seemed to fill her vision. Then he spoke her name. Samantha. The awful hopelessness in his voice cut through her like a knife. Struggling to her feet, she called out to him, hoping to reassure him. "Charles!" She began to run towards him, yet somehow, no matter how fast she ran, he remained at a distance, watching her with eyes full of despair. "Charles!" she shouted again, a sob clogging her throat. And then suddenly, she was beside him. Falling to her knees, she tried to staunch the flow of blood, but it would not be stopped. She could feel it, warm and sticky, coating her hands as she pressed them into the torn fabric of his waistcoat. Charles let out a shuddering sigh as he turned his head to hers. Her own heart seemed to speed up, as though determined to take on the unfulfilled beats of his, and she choked back another sob. His lips moved, trying to form words, and she leaned closer to catch them. Suddenly, his hands shot up and circled her throat. She could feel his fingers digging into her neck with surprising force. She clutched at them, fighting to prise them from her. But the harder she fought, the tighter they grew. Eyes wide with panic, she looked down to see Charles watching her. His expression wasn't vindictive, or even angry. It was achingly sad. Samantha Kingston woke with a gasp. For a moment she didn't know where she was. The nightmare still lingered at the edges of her consciousness. Then she saw the familiar hangings of the four-poster bed and caught the scent of dried lavender from the sachet by her pillow, and her body relaxed. Judging by the grey light that filtered through a gap in the bed curtains, it was morning, but early. She shivered and pulled the quilt up over her shoulders. The maid had not yet been in to light the fire, and the room was so cold she could see the cloud of her breath. She knew she ought to lie down and try to go back to sleep. Madge, her hostess, would insist on it if she were in the room, but it wouldn't do. She was too awake now, and too cold. A sense of guilty relief passed over her as she swung her feet down and slid them into the soft fabric of her slippers. She was supposed to be working to overcome her fears, reminding herself that dreams were not real. Yet she could not help but be glad that the struggle, at least for that day, was over.